Badoo.
Hello, hello. How's everyone doing? Jason, how are you?
It's another Mirrorless Monday.
Yep, that it is. And we're so happy that you're all here. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I see some comments already in the chat. Secretly, Pocky Party is me, but my personal account is on here. But that's all good. That's me in chat. And thank you guys for commenting. We got Blanco86 here from Minnesota. Did I get that state right? I'm bad with geography.
That's Minnesota.
We got Kevin here locally, NYC. Hopefully I've seen you in the Adorama store itself. Kevin Ferguson here from Missouri. Thank you guys for leaving your comments. But yeah, hopefully we'll be going over some of the things that you guys have left us in the chat. If you guys signed up through the Eventbrite, we have some of the questions separated here, so we'll be able to answer those guys out. And if you guys have no sound, double check.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there anyone else with no sound?
Yeah. Oh no, Blanco's heard me. Yeah, perfect.
Michael's got you. All right.
Yeah, perfect. I'm always worried with live streams, you know, you never know if it's working or not, but it sounds like we got everything in order. I actually have my video set up for 60 frames per second. The camera itself isn't recording in 30 frames per second, or it's not recording 60 outputting, but the reason for that is because we're going to be talking about demystifying videography, and this is more of like a intermediate videography course, not so much for beginners where you need to know shutters, and we're going to go through the refreshers there as well, but it's more about, do I need S-Log, do I need these high bit rates, all intra, I've heard all these words, but how do I apply that to my videos, and is it worthwhile? And joining us today, we have Jason Etzel at the helm, joining me and able to parse out any questions. Hey, Jason.
I won't say I'm at the helm, but I am rocking the co-pilot seat here, Chewbacca style.
There
you
go.
Get to be Han Solo. But I'll be checking out the chat here as well, everyone. So as Robbie noted, feed in those questions. I'll be your voice to him as well, and as he mentioned there, we'll be addressing a lot of the terms and stuff you've been hearing. And as the title says, Robbie is going to demystify video for us all.
That's what I'm hoping for, at least.
That's the goal.
If I don't know the answer, we'll be able to answer it in due time. You have our social media here in the bottom. So if you do want to follow us and shoot us a message there, we'll be able to answer them in the future. And we can definitely get back to you on that as well. But yeah, Jason, how's everything on your end?
It is good. Back from a large road trip here, so I am reinvigorated by coming back to cold air.
Yeah.
Which in some cases I'm sure will be let's put it this way. I'm sure there'll be many questions, and as always, Robbie and I welcome them all. But let's just start out with, some people have already asked, do not leave your gear outside in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
It will chill the hands.
There is your battery life will, I mean, you could shoot in the cold, but for how long, right?
Yeah, don't leave the gear overnight, I guess is the best way to say it, in the cold. But yes, our gear will go out there, shoot in the cold, shoot in the streets. Robbie and I will be doing some work tomorrow on that as well, and I doubt it's getting tropical in under 24 hours.
Right, exactly. And we had a comment, I think that's Kevin's question there. He's new to videography, so I think this is great, and he's wondering what the downsides are for recording all in 60 frames per second. Hopefully we could, I'm pretty sure there's a slide in there that we could answer for you there, Kevin. So sit tight, and hopefully that'll be able to be answered for you. I actually have the A1 Mark II here with me connected, and we could see that the white balance is very off, but I could go over the menu settings and everything else here for the camera. Let me just see if I could hit menu. There you go.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, also, Itchik, let us know if you got sound back through refreshing. And Alton, we all start somewhere, so on some of these terms, feel free, if you're like a little confused, to put in the chat. We'll get some definitions up there for you as well.
Cool. All right. So, without further ado, I guess we'll get started, right?
I think so. We've got a full chat here. So everyone, I'm going to be going video dark a little bit, but I'll be sitting here in the chat And like I said, I am your voice for your questions here. So I'm going to help get your information over to Robbie, who's going to give an all-out presentation because this is what he does.
All right, let's see. Oh, audio sounds to be a little bit different. Let's double check that real quick.
Sound checking.
No, I think that's it. I think it's being recorded. You heard that tap, right?
I didn't hear a tap.
Okay. Oh, right. So it's probably everyone else in the live stream. Akiva just confirmed it, so we're okay.
Yeah, we're a little bit different on that one, you and I. But as long as people can hear us, and if at one point you don't hear us, please put it in the chat as well.
Yeah.
But we should be good to go. And even when I go video dark, I too might even get my headphones.
Perfect. Thanks for bearing with us here, but we're going to get started in just a second. So thank you so much, Jason. And if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer that as we go. And I'll bring Jason back in here with us. All right? All right. So I guess we'll get started with demystifying videography. All right. So moving forward here, this is the Demystifying Videography live stream. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Robbie Bulilan, and I've been with the Sony team here for about almost 4 years, coming in April. So it's been pretty amazing. Got to learn a lot, but I've been shooting before those 4 years. I've been shooting Sony for a long time. I've been working for marketing, social media, and creating videos. So I have had my hand in videography as well. And so any questions, or I've had to ask a lot of these questions myself, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to have one of these classes and live streams, right? So in terms of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be going through a few things like filmmaking concepts, the recording formats, like you've probably seen the XAVC and what does the HS mean. There's a lot in there, and the same thing with S-logs. Do we need it? Can I download other people's LUTs? And is it taking away your artistic integrity? And all these other questions, right? But yeah, those are things you definitely have to consider. Here, let me lower down the volume there for the background music. Thanks, Michelle. And I also wanted to find a way to keep things simple as well, because I really wanted to consider workflow when it comes to creating your videos, right? And just as we had an issue, or just when we noticed that the audio changed, how important audio is and things we really need to stay on top of when it comes to audio. And that's a major factor right now, right? And we also will go over through apps, so we could find out the advantages to take advantage of everything on the Sony lineup, especially when they're free apps that we could utilize, right? All right. So first things first, I wanted to go over what we need to consider when we are making your video. Not specifically me, not specifically your neighbor or anyone else, but those are just things we have to consider, especially how much we have to put in, how much work we need to put in, right? So there are a few things that I would like to consider is definitely who you're recording for, who your audience is. Is it for social media? Is it for YouTube? Is it for a movie? Is it going to be for a, it depends on how much time, right? If you need this to be out there incredibly fast, then we really need to keep things simple, right? Even there was a comment here who I think Alton said to make sure that we need to keep it simple. And that's another key factor, right? It also comes down to who the audience is. So just things to consider. And the best way to really consider it, or in terms of analogy's sake, right? I would compare it to food, right? I love eating. So this is how I would think about it if I wanted to think about it a different way, right? If it is for, let's say, YouTube, I would say that's very fast food. You need to have it out very quick, but also delicious. So we don't need to work hard on making the videos, right? If we're dining in, then there is a team of people making the food for us. We're taking our time. And well, not a team, but you know, there's people preparing the food, like yourself. If you're making the different ingredients, you're mashing the potatoes, or if you're doing instant potatoes, right? And then the luxury restaurant I would compare to a people who make movies. There's someone there, their only job is to cut the onions. Those poor tearing eyes are always just cutting the onions. And so and there's other people who's in charge of the taste, what, and you know, developing the flavor for different dishes. So luxury restaurants are essentially like making a movie, right? These people have taken the time to curate and fine tune the restaurant and the meal, which is why it's functioning at such a high level in terms of making a video, right? So just things we need to consider. So in that same retrospect, it would be similar in video when we're talking about what's important for post-production. I'm gonna get more deep in this in the future slides, so we're gonna go about this later, but this is just a quick way to see post-production. That would be more of like a Michelin star restaurant if we're working with movies, and then quick delivery for video, FX3 if you're working with YouTube. Then shooting in S-Cinetone would be the one that makes more sense, and it goes straight to that. And then we have one of our newer categories, like the ZV line, which keeps it very simple, right? It's not that we need a ZV line camera specifically, but we can make it very, very simple when it comes to shooting for social media, where we send the video to your phone, edit through your phone, and then post from your phone. So there's no need for working so hard on something that's gonna be swiped up in about 3 seconds anyway. So yeah, those are the things that I wanted to talk about today, and we'll go deeper on. So again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Cool. So first, I wanted to talk about filmmaking concepts and what that entails, right? We're going to go through ISOs, and if you're coming from photography, I get it. There's definitely been a lot of different things that, you know, there's a lot of different parts in videography that separate it from photography. And a few of those things are that shutter speeds are less flexible, your white balance is less flexible, and your lighting is also less flexible. There's no shutter speed. There's a rule in there that we'll talk about in a little bit called the 180-degree rule. So your shutter speed's pretty much locked in to make sure it looks natural. White balance, because of the different codecs, unless white balance is flexible if you plan to use very high data rates. And we'll talk about that later as well. And lighting, we don't have strobes. We have continuous lighting, so it's also less flexible in that way as well. So before LEDs, it would be very hot, very warm to use those lights. Luckily, LEDs are very low power, and so we can keep a room cool. But still, regardless, we don't have the flexibility of a strobe light because we need every frame to be on for the frame rate that you're recording, right? And as far as post-processing goes, like I said earlier, if you wanted to go to Popeyes and get a chicken that way, it's going to taste delicious, right? So it could be really fast, or you can make the chicken dish at home, but you will need to get the ingredients and you will need to cook it yourself as well. All right. Or, you know, have someone else make it. That's what editors are for, if we could flex a little bit of that income. All right. So first I wanted to talk about the frame rate for a film. You've probably seen in your camera, it says 24p, 30p, 60p. What does that mean, right? That means that there are, for whatever number it is, like 24p, there are 24 pictures per second that we're viewing. So if we look at it like a flip book and we are seeing 24 pictures in that 1 second, then that's what the 24p is, right? And then 30p. So this is going back to Kevin's question, actually. This is resolving that. Why not just record in 60p, right? And technically you can, but there is an effect that happens. And if you're, this also depends on, for this live stream, if you're seeing this right now, and depending if your TV has the refresh rate to see the 60 hertz, that's going to be another key factor on this next slide that I show you, right? Because 24p is typical for movies. just because that's how it was traditionally. It looks more natural and more purposeful. 30p is more standard for YouTube and current content being seen on television. So that's just a standard that's being seen right now. 24p, 30p, you're not going to see too much of a difference unless you look very closely. But if we're talking about a drama, a telenovela that you would normally see, that's normally in 60p, and that's why it looks so smooth. You'll see in this pan in this commercial here for General Hospital, you're going to see that 60p frame rate if you're watching in a 60p monitor right there. It just looks really fast or is really smooth, and normally it's used for sports so you could see all the action, but it really comes down to how many frames you're seeing in that 1 second, right? I'm live streaming at 60p, so if you were able to see that smoothness, give me a thumbs up or let me know in the comments. But yeah, so that's what happens if you record in 60p, right? Another thing people like to do with those recording frame rates, like 120p, is anyone really going to see 120p? Probably not. But the main purpose for that is slowing down the video footage. So let's say we record in 120p and I slow it down to 30p. Because it's recording 120 frames per second, I could actually slow it down. So I could slow it down 4 times to see it in 30p. So that's why, or that's how come it's better. We're able to see that slow motion video because it's recording 120 frames per second in that situation, right? Let's see here. Jason, is there a question I could answer? Let me know.
It's not so much a question as a possible opinion in some cases, being you just brought up the General Hospital. But we have from Kevin, random fun question, Robbie and Jason, what movies and shows do you think have the best cinematography? He personally likes Better
Oh,
Call Saul.
ooh,
This is
cinematography.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of those where sometimes I have to tell you all right now, if you haven't, go watch Shogun. That was just not only well done because I'm big in historical productions, but the cinematography was just dead on and the perfect kind of blend of effects and practical photography. I can't really think of a show otherwise, but I can say I am a very big Caleb Deschanel fan when it comes to movie cinematography. So those are films like The Natural and Road to Perdition. But Robbie, I'll default on some of your wisdom there as well.
Oh man, I watch a lot of anime, so it still works because there's a lot of framing in there and different lenses that you would consider for it, wide angle. Uh, so it's hard to put a figure on it depending on movies and stuff like that. So I'll have to hit pause on it. I mean, I just saw Wicked earlier, and that was an amazing movie. But I don't know if it's something where it's just like, yeah, that's my kind of movie. So I might have to get back on it. But everyone else, let me know what you thought as well. In terms of what any movie suggestions, because I should probably watch some. I've seen some of the stuff that Jason suggested to me, so I
Yeah,
would love
put
to
it
take
in the
anyone's
chat
suggestions in the
because
chat.
at the end, I'm going to be like Robbie because right now I'm rethinking this as well, Kevin. And even as Robbie is noting anime, some of the way that these things are drawn are practically reflecting like anamorphic lenses in actual cinematography, even though it's
Exactly.
animated.
Right.
So there's a lot to
They're all
learn and
related.
be inspired by.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So moving forward, and as far as frame rates go, 120 frames, you could slow motion it down. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is shutter speed, right? This is the reason why your shutter speed is less. You have less control over shutter speed because there's a rule of thumb called the 180-degree rule. So depending on the frame rate that you're recording, you need to record at double that speed. So if you're recording at 24p, you want to be at 1/50th of a second, and 60p, you want to be recording at 1/20th of a second, because that's the one that looks most natural, right? So I'm going to set on my camera 1/60th of a second, and we're going to see what happens. All right, so I have 1/60th of a second here, and I am going to wave. And look at the motion blur over here, right? That's what we have to consider when we're shooting at 1/60th of a second. And if I go too fast, I gotta compensate. compensate that a little bit. I'm at 1/640th of a second right now, and now look at the hand motion, the motion blur over here, right? This is way too sharp and less natural to look at. So that's what we have to consider when we're choosing the shutter speed, right? Let me bring it back down. And hey, Seth. Thanks for letting me be here with the Adorama live stream. I'm sure everyone else has seen all the other coffee with Seth, the coffee live streams. I was just there. I was in the background if you were there for Tony Gale's live stream. But quick shout out to Seth and his coffee with photographers. All right. So moving forward, shutter speed, that's going to be one of the things that makes it look more natural. Here's another example of that. When it comes to too slow is also a negative, right? Because now the shutter speed will look, it's going to look like a propeller, or it could look dreamy. But again, rules are meant to be broken, but as long as it makes sense and it's purposeful, right? But essentially that's a reason why your shutter speed is more limited and less flexible. Another thing to keep in mind of is that there's a thing, and we can look into this later. There is a cool video in YouTube called by Captain Disillusion, who talks about shutter speed if you want to watch that. And it's a really good watch, especially if you need to know kind of the nerdy reasons why banding happens at 1/8000th of a second. It definitely has to do with bad lighting, but also because the camera is recording too quickly. And the way, if you've seen any of these banding, this banding artifact happening, it's because your shutter speed is too high. And if you reduce it, then it'll be able to be clean, essentially, right? Now, as far as the camera goes, depending on which camera that you have, it more than likely will have S&Q, right? So what does S&Q mean? And what essentially that means is it means slow and quick. Out of the camera, it will automatically slow down the video. So you choose the frame rate. Let's say I want it to output 30p, but I want you to record 120 frames per second. What the camera will do is it will automatically slow motion the video once you're reviewing it. So instead of putting it through the computer and editing it, it's already in slow motion. The same thing from time lapses. You could tell it to record for 1 frame per second and output to 30p, and it will show a time lapse because now it's speeding up, so slow and quick, right? That's essentially what's happening here, and we could take a look over what happens with the time lapse, right? So if you've never messed around with it in your camera, it's really simple. So you just go over here to menu, and you'll see in your camera settings, especially if you're in the newer camera settings, you'll see S&Q settings right over here. And you choose your frame rate. So let's say I wanted to record at 24p at 120 frames per second. And it'll also tell me that it's going to give me a 5x slow motion video. So I'm recording in 120p, and the camera will automatically slow it down to 24p. It won't record audio, but when you're slow motioning or you're doing a time lapse, that's typically what I expect to happen anyway. So we should be okay. And yeah. So if you haven't utilized S&Q yet, definitely give that a shot.
By the way, Robbie, we do have a question in
Sure.
relation to S&Q from Kiwi, Cleo, and the Buggies. When would you shoot S&Q mode while shooting an event? And one thing I wrote in the chat there as well is just to keep in mind that when you're on S&Q, you no longer have audio. And just for my own 2 cents, then I'll throw it to you for the better nickel and or quarters worth of advice. Sometimes it's good just for some quick stuff. It could be like if it's a wedding and event, it's like kids are, throwing the rice back up in the air or something like that. Something you had to do on the fly where you couldn't really get the video set at the high frame rate for editing later. But it always has its time and places. But Robbie, where do you like to use the S&Q?
For weddings, it would be if that's your second camera, that's not recording audio, right? If you're getting audio that with people mic'd up, then we obviously don't want to go on S&Q then, unless we have a secondary camera to capture slow motion of the kiss or something like that. we need to make sure that we have the audio separately for the client, unless you've agreed with your clients that audio isn't important. And yeah, so SNQ really, it's to capture those key moments, as long as you're not the main videographer to capture that, or the you're not capturing the A footage that is supposed to have the audio, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be used, and even outside of weddings, you've got such things as birthday parties, people blowing out the candles. There's always a moment for it, and it can be found in the menu and some of our other Sony cameras. You'll actually see it on the mode dial. And Alton, I see your question there for S&Q. That's what we're talking about right here. And as Robbie was saying,
Yeah,
basically
it
for the
might be
slow
delayed.
and quick. Yeah, there's a little bit of possible delay from where we are and what's coming up with the audio. So
So hopefully
let
that
us
answered.
know in the chat if
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little bit off a few seconds. We
No, we're good.
apologize.
That's just the natural delay of this world. But yeah, so beyond S and Q, we have, this is essentially what shutter angle is. 180 degrees. This was more in reference to the olden days where the camera, the film camera, was a half disc, and it was recording in that rotation. So it was 180 degrees, and there was recording at 24 frames per second, right? So that's what it means for the exposure. And again, I would suggest going to check out Captain Disillusion, because it explains it even further. But that's essentially what you're using. If you're using a cinema camera, 180 degrees is pretty much standard YouTube. It's essentially what you're seeing with this motion blur as well, right? So if we had no control over your shutter speed, really, how are we going to get the aperture that we want, right? Unless we're shooting at 1/8000 of a second, we're okay with the very sharp frames instead of getting that motion blur, then that's kind of what we have to deal with, right? To get the aperture that we want, this is where a variable ND is going to be really, really useful. And so you're able to reduce the amount of light going through and adjust that through the filter itself, and then you could get the aperture that you want. So that's the way to resolve that issue, right? But you really have to react to it, right? And that's why we have cameras like the FX6, the Burano, the FR7s, the FX9s. They all have a variable ND filter inside that's electronic. So whatever aperture that you want to use, then you don't really have an issue here. So even if you go a step from inside to outside, it automatically changes the density of that neutral density, and it will be slow, or it will be able to show the aperture that you're looking for the shot, and shockless. It won't really, no one will be able to notice that as well. All right. Another artifact that we could probably see, you've probably heard of, is a thing called rolling shutter, right? So if you look at the video on one of our older cameras, the A9 II, we could see this. What's happening is it's jelloing, right? It's in a bullet train, so it's all sideways. So essentially what's happening is the frame is recording line by line going down. And so it has this jelloing effect whenever you're doing that. And one way to resolve it is to have a global shutter camera. And that's not something that's standard across the board, right? A production camera with global shutter can cost up to 30,000 to 40,000 plus. With the A9 III, it has global shutter, so we're able to have no distortion at all, because the speed is so fast to the sensor that there is just no time for a distortion of that jelloing, right? So the global shutter is just one of those really nice features that we get from the A9 III, and why it's important. Cool. So let's
Of
go.
which, Robbie, we just
Yeah.
had one question that was coming up that was actually sent in to us from Juan. And one of your questions were a benefit of shooting a video on an A1
Mm-hmm.
Mark II versus the A9 III. And what Robbie just explained there and demonstrated with the jelloing effect and showing the bullet train, that's where the A9 III and the global shutter really do play. And that is something that videographers have been looking for in this form factor, as Robbie mentioned, because only camera out there with a global shutter right now in full frame
Yeah.
DI, which would be like these cameras, that is the one. So the A9 III packs a punch in video as well. I, for one, love using it for strobes. The 120 frames per second is amazing in stills, but that is something that definitely makes it stand out for video, Juan. So it's the global shutter there. A9 III is going to give you some more capabilities. A12 will still hammer it home and has 8K internal.
Exactly.
Both are good, but A9 III will give you something there that the A12 cannot.
Yep, and I know a lot of people who use 8K recording as well. So the A1 and the A12 and the A7R5. If you guys are recording in 8K, we're going to talk about that in a future slide. But yeah, there's a lot of different advantages to that. But yeah. All right, so we're going to move forward here and talk about ISO. I could probably give you guys a bigger screen, but just to simply to talk, just as a refresher, if you raise your ISO, the noise will pretty much show up more. I'm going to... Oh, hold on. Whoopsie. Wrong frame. Let me see here. Should be this one, but I'm not going to mess with it. All right. But yeah, so if you raise your ISO, essentially the noise will go up. But cameras like the A7S III, FX3s, they're very good in low light, especially with their dual ISO. Not really native ISO, but they have a dual base ISO that is pretty much very close to 800 and 12,800. I could go into that deeper in a different class, but I really don't want to touch on that since it's so specific to that camera itself. But the A7S III, the A9, or the A7S III, the FX3, and the ZVE1, all amazing cameras for low light if you're looking to keep that noise down. All right, another thing about white balance, and I'm going to go back into this, is that there's less control, mainly because of the compression that we're choosing, right? There's, once you set it, it's kind of hard set if you're trying to conserve hard drive space, unless you're recording in a codec called RAW, just like for photography. But the thing is, it holds a lot of data, and we have to consider how many frames per second that's happening, right? Including audio. So to make sure that we don't need to buy 10 hard drives to start recording and not have to worry about white balance, we're going to need to use compression. And that's why white balance is really important to nail, right? We need to make sure that the white balance is right, because it's going to be a lot harder to correct in the future. So one of the things that's nice is a white balance gray card. I have one here. So let me see if I could show you guys this. You see that here? Essentially, it's just a gray card. It's set for 18% gray. And all it's doing is that it's able to record the video and just make sure everything's at 18%. The camera knows what 18% gray is, and it will set the colors to be 18% gray. So if I go to my A1 Mark II right now, let me just extend this here and see if I can. It's pretty blue, right? And so I have to go to my white balance. If I go all the way to the bottom, you'll see that I can have a custom, and I can set it, right? So setting this, it's going to look for 18% gray whenever you hit set. So I'm going to put this gray card in front of it, right? And now the white balance is pretty much set. That looks very accurate. The pink should be pink here for a little Pikachu over there. But essentially all that is just trying to make sure that everything that the light touches is 18% gray, and it knows how to get to 18% gray. So having that white balance set up like that, perfect. And 9 out of 10 times, especially if it's a fast production, you're good and you don't have to worry about it, right?
That is the importance of getting the proper Pikachu yellow at all times. Right. And for those who are Sony shooters, nice little pro tip from all of us there. And I apologize to Adorama in advance as Robbie and I take away possibly an accessory sale for all of you. But if you look at your Sony camera, the body cap or the rear cap of your Sony lenses manufactured by Sony, those are 18% gray. They can also be used as targets for your auto white balance if you're out in the field and if you need to do something on the quick. Well, without a sticker on it.
Without a sticker.
Without a sticker on it, but the stickers do look lovely and are probably available somehow at Adorama. But it is a good thing, and it is important to have that information accurate. So, as Robbie just demonstrated there, it's but the work of a moment. And even if you're happy with your auto white balance, I always encourage everyone just take a moment to go through the custom process. It is something to see exactly how close you can be, or something so specific where you really need the colors and contrast to be perfect, much like Pikachu there with the flowers.
Yep. All right, let's see. There's a few questions here. And I think I figured it out, Alton. There is another thing making audio. So I turned it off. Hopefully that fixed it. But yeah, let's see. Kiwi and Clio. I always get confused on which codec to record on my FX30. Perfect. We're going to actually talk about that in just a second. And they own the A7R5, FX30, and FX6, but I'm trying to see if the second body for photos. Okay. Yeah,
you're jumping everywhere, Robbie. You got to scroll to the top, my good friend.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna let you handle the questions then. Let me know, and I'll try.
Well, do you want a question break or?
No, I can move forward. Yeah.
All right. How about this? For everyone, please keep coming to them in the chat. And there's been a few there where I've said like, hey, Robbie and I will hammer some of that stuff out. And as noted there, someone had a question on shutter angle. We'll bring it up again at the end so that way Robbie can go back to the slide. And as always, we will stay here as long as you guys have questions. And we will bring up all the materials we can to help educate.
All right. Thanks, Jason. All right. So we're going to move forward real quick. So great card. Very important to have. So let's go over the next generation advantage. You probably have one of the newer cameras. And I kind of just want to breeze through this really quickly, depending on which camera you're using specifically. But there are a lot of nice advantages when it comes to our newer cameras, like the new menu system. Being able to, I'm using the A7C II right now on this camera, and I just have it plugged in through the USB-C, and I'm using the live stream, USB streaming feature. So it's just as easy as plug and play. And the other key factors is the monitoring control app. And if you record vertically, it'll also send to your phone vertically. And I'll go over this later, is the creative look versus creative style, which is really cool if you're very lazy in terms of editing video. All right. So here are the three different menu versions, menu version 1, 2, and 3. These are all with the different cameras that you have. So if you have any of these cameras, like the original A7 series or the A7 II series, like the A7S2 or the A7R2, you're going to be in menu version 1. And then menu version 2, this may be a more current camera that you have. It may be the camera that you're using right now. But the newer version cameras, all the features that I'm talking about, that could all be utilized with our more recent cameras like the A7S III and the A1 Mark II, of course. I need to update that slide. And I will continue to update this slide as the years come. But yeah, one of the nice things about it really is just having that touchscreen capability. And if you hit the trash can in your menu, if you're highlighting something, it'll actually tell you what it is. So if you're ever lost in your camera settings, if I hit menu right here, and we're not really sure what S and Q is, you see in the bottom here that trash can icon. If I hit the trash can right now, I could go to in camera guide, and then it says sets S and Q settings. Not the most cleanest one, but let's go here, and I could do this. So it sets the bit rate for the color information and everything else. So if you're ever lost, it's a good way to really figure out what this feature is, or at least know the gist of it. All right. So I think we had a question about file formats, right, Jason?
We do have some questions in regards to both file formats, and we also have some stuff there that kind of, in a way, going with your color profiles there when it comes down to the wonderful world of log.
All right. So once we cross it, that's when the questions, you could let me know which questions you fielded for me, and then we'll keep moving forward.
If you want to keep on trucking, we're going to have a good back and forth with suggestions for these fine people at the end.
All right. So this is pretty good nerdy part of the slides here. But Essentially, we're going to be talking about the file formats and why this is important, right? Image video size, HD. This is outputting to 1080p right now. I don't have the upload speed, or I'm kind of worried to upload in 4K, honestly. Everything looks pretty good right now, but 4K is kind of the standard of what everyone expects. Most people have 4K televisions. No one really has 8K, right? But why is that important? Why would you want to record in K? And that's mainly because it's future-proofing yourself. Not only that, but you're able to crop in if you're outputting to 4K. I know some YouTubers who will record in 8K so they could crop in, and they could still retain all that information, right? You could you could zoom in 16 times if you're recording 8K and you still haven't lost detail in the video. So it's a really great thing to consider as well, right? All right, so codec. Essentially, what codec is really, it's the part that compresses data to enable faster transmission and decompresses received data. So essentially, it's just a wrap in terms of how it processes things. And for Sony, we have XAVC, right? It's a standard image quality that we use to record. But you probably heard of H.264, these codecs, H.264 and H.265, and that really is what it comes down to, right? We also have all intra. I'm going to fast forward real quick so at least I can show you, or we can look to the side over here, right? You can see my mouse. Can they see my mouse, Jason? I think so. Maybe not. But
they cannot see your mouse.
Yeah, I can't see my mouse either, so that's okay. But that's all right. Anyway, XAVC HS is H.265, which is the new codec that we have, and H.264 is our other codec that we have that is older but more commonly used, right? Those are different ways to compress the video to make it a smaller file size, because what's important now is to be able to keep that data without losing too much detail, right? So what's happening with H.265 and why is it saving more files? It's a lot newer. It was introduced in 2013, but it's way more available now, and more video programs are more able to view it without too much lag and more capability of editing it. And the H.264 is it's older, so it's easier to process, essentially, right? With H.265, you see that the squares are a lot larger, and that way it's able to save more space. With H.264, it's all gridded, and that's why it's more streamlined and not as good at efficient at compressing video. So how is the compression working? Essentially, there are iframes, which is intra frames, meaning those are a fresh new image, and it's going to use that previous data in between to use previously to compress that video. That way, it's not using a new image every time, and that's how it's able to save space. So if there's a talking head, everything behind me, if I could show behind me, everything behind me that's the same, it's going to use that same frame, and that way it's able to save hard drive space, right, for the compression. The things that are moving is myself, and that's going to be the new data for H.264 or H.265. But H.265 would just be able to be a larger chunk over here, and that way it's able to compress more data. So that's essentially what's happening with those compressions, the H.265 compression and H.265. And if you upload anything onto YouTube, it's going to be outputting, and it's converted into H.265, so it's easier for anyone using data to download that video. But yeah.
All right, and also we hope, Kiwi and Cleo, you had the question about codecs on the FX30. So hopefully that'll give a little bit of clarity. There is no, that's the one you use and that's not the one you don't use. It's all situational. So put some stuff in the chat there if you have any additional questions on there, or anyone else who had any other questions regarding codecs.
Right, because if I know a few wedding videographers that swear by H.265 because they're really not trying to go for anything more than 1 terabyte for each wedding, right? That's their goal when they have 8 cameras recording. And so H.265 helps that, and they won't really look for a camera unless it has that codec to be able to record, which our Sony cameras do have, thankfully, right? On the opposite spectrum of that, how can we get all the data to make sure we have something dynamic? Let's say there's always something moving, and we want to make sure we're producing it at its best quality without any loss of data. So that's why we have all intra. You'll see XAVC-S-I. That means that it is lossless video, right? Each frame is individual. And we can see on this slide over here, all intra on top. So every frame is new, whereas in the compressions like H.264 or H.265, also known as long-op, it uses the new data as the new frames, and that's what's being written, right? So that's essentially what you need to think about when you're editing your videos. So bitrate is going to be a major factor, especially if you're recording in all intra, because every frame is new, versus the compression rate. So we're really just choosing how compressed our videos are going to be and what we could get away with. Because again, you're watching this right now in H.265, and will you be able to tell the difference? Are you guys wishing that it was recorded in those different codecs? I don't think it really matters to be in this, though, in the way you're watching this, right? So just really food for thought, and depending on what you're recording and where you're outputting to, right? So this graph really is just showing how much data you can record. It says better for editing, better for previewing, right? Mainly because there's less data in the previews, but it is season to taste. If you're doing this for social media, I don't think it matters. I think you should go for whatever's lowest so you could save your hard drive space and get the content out there faster. But if this was a very Michelin star dish that you're trying to serve up to everybody, I would go for the most data to make sure you have the most information to edit your footage, right? So you've heard of 422, you've heard of 420, 8-bit is bad, 10-bit good, and then there's 16-bit uncompressed, right? So what does that mean, right? And that's essentially how much data, again, that we're getting for our video. So for 8-bit, you can see that there's a lot less details here. We have less black and whites, there's less chroma, but the thing is, this also means that there's going to be a lot more data involved, right? So there are visual advantages over here. I would say 10-bit is probably going to be the one where it has the biggest slope for improvement, whereas it's if you go higher, no one really will be able to tell, or you wouldn't be able to use that information for yourself for anyone to really notice, right? So with 10-bit, you're now getting over 1 billion possible colors in your video footage, whereas if you were recording an 8-bit, you're probably just getting around 16 million. But that's a lot, right? Both of them are still very high numbers. In 12-bit, obviously, we have all the colors that we couldn't see or maybe don't even notice. But 8 to 10-bit is a big deal, mainly, and this is stressed here on the right side, that 8-bit will show that kind of banding as it gradiates, and you're able to recover more detail on the 8-bit, on the 10-bit side versus the 8-bit, right? So I want to ask this to everyone here that's watching in the comments. If you can leave in the comments, which is right for you? What do you do, right? We have some wedding videographers here that that was on the chat. Let me know and maybe I could give a suggestion. Let me know if you think that's right for you. Because if I was shooting for social media, I would shoot at 8-bit because it's the one with the least amount of data. And so I could send it to my phone even faster. If you look at my Instagram, everything was sent to my phone from an A7S III and edited on my phone. And that was mainly because I was recording in 8-bit. So yeah. Let me know in the chat, and I think we'll be able to have a break. Do you have any questions, Jason?
Well, one thing's for certain is we got to bring back the orange baseball hats at a Sony Adorama event. So we'll have to make a note of that, and we'll have to make sure the last witness puts his up for auction with a signature because he's a celebrity. We do have some questions which might actually tie in with what we have up there, with which is a right for you. And also, I believe Alton up there, thanks for the follow-ups, and for Kiwi. Based on what you just went over with some of the codecs there, what you did as far as explaining some of the colors, the bit rates, and we went a little bit into the file formats as well. Do you have any recommendations for some people who would have extended shooting? And as I just put in the chat, everyone, you have to keep in mind a lot of these suggestions are like, I've got multiple batteries, I have external like hard drives to take fast transfer off of memory cards. There are some factors that would play in. But Robbie, if you had to suggest something that would be a good, hitting for a double all around, something that'll give you some good color space, latitude for light editing, and extended shooting times,
Mm.
feel free to share with the people.
Well, it comes down to if that person has clarified whether they're recording it for, let's say, an interview that could go for an hour and a half long, right? That I would probably go for a 10-bit video recording. But also you probably need the hard drive space. I would definitely utilize a CF Express Type A, because if you're recording long form in that high bit rate, the camera will overheat in that sense. And if you're recording with a SD card, it's just not fast enough to make sure that the data is out there. So if you really want to record long form and make sure there's no hiccups, I would go for a CF Express Type A. You can get it at 1 TB of a file size, or like in terms of storage size. And also, you could record long form, because I've had issues where people were recording 8K for 3 hours long with their A7R5, and they were using a V90 SD card, and so the camera would overheat, and that was the issue. They recorded with a CF Express Type A, and because the data writing speed was a lot faster, it became a non-issue, and they were able to record in long form. So it really depends, again, on the hard drive size. We got Talent Photography here, right, Jason? Who's
Yeah,
commented?
I see that there with his horses as well. And Kiwi, just as Robbie was mentioning right there, one thing I would put in there in addition is at least up to some V90 cards if you can from the V60. Especially when it comes to video, these cards start to get taxed a little bit more. Every little bit helps in clearing out your buffer, and this is also going to help with your transfer later when you want to clean the cards.
Right, and this is because they were using an A7R5. There's no fan on the side, right? It wasn't meant to be doing that. So if you had an FX3, that's going to be a non-issue again, because it has a fan. The same thing with the FX30. It's also, again, a non-issue, and it comes down to how much hard drive space can your camera hold, and it just allowing it to not stress so much about it, right? But yeah, we have a few more slides here. I shortened this down so we could kind of go over and answer any few questions. So I'm going to go over a few things left, but a big one I think is S-Log, so I'm going to continue onwards. All right, Jason. Thank you. All right, so S-Log. What is it, right? Essentially, it depends on how much data you're trying to get. What you're seeing right now is called Rec 709, and that is standard production color space, how anyone could see it. It's very simple in terms of what anything could see. So if you look at that blue triangle over there, I think or maybe the black triangle is probably Rec 709. And once you get to the red triangle, it just means that it's recording more detail, more color in terms of the data that it's recording, right? But the thing is, it isn't what you normally would see, and that's why we're seeing it very flat. It's because it's holding on to as much data as it can, and it's able to recover a lot more data. So with Rec 709, it could mean that we're losing details in the blacks, right? So if we look at the shadows and the tables, you could see more of the table in there, but anything that is true black, it's just crushed with the Rec 709. The same thing with a window, right? This is definitely recorded in Rec 709, because if this was in any standard home, the window would just be pure white if you're recording, right? So the thing is, though, yes, we can record an S-Log and it will be flat, but we have to bring it back to Rec 709 and then move. It's a lot of editing. It's a lot of post-process work. And it really comes down to whether it's going to be beneficial for your videos and how fast it needs to be out there, right? So if you're recording an S-Log, you 80% of the time need a PC that will be able to edit your S-Log files to be back to normal and make it look more natural. And also, because the data is there previously with the window, everything in the background, nothing's crushed, you're able to recover that data. So it is going to look like it has a lot of detail back. But this is really like if you need to recover those shadows or highlights, right? It's a fail-safe if you're recording and editing that way. But Do you need it? If it's in this kind of situation right now, personally, everything's controlled in lighting. I don't really need to be recording an S-Log because now I'm just adding more work to myself, right? So it comes down to whether you need it or not. Now, a standard in terms of color science, something that we've had since the Venice 2 is S-Cinetone. So it is already a cinematic look, and you can still recover a lot of data in there. It's kind of the best of both worlds, where you can still get a really good color, and you can still recover not as much as S-Log, but you're still able to recover a decent amount of information, right? But going back to S-Log and why it was flat, what is a LUT now, right? So a LUT, essentially, now this becomes the creative part of the artistic work of working with S-Log, right? Now we can make scenes more warm. We can make things more cold. It's very stylistic. If I wanted to pretend that it's incredibly... Let me see if I could mess with my camera settings here in a second. That's always great to hear when you're working with live stream.
As Robbie is working on the fly and finding his art, if you will, there. We did have some questions that came in from Karen and a few others. I just wanted to say this kind of is a blanket answer for your questions in regards to things like how do you get a bunch of cameras to match out in the same color space. One quick way to do it is what Robbie just showed, S-Cinetone. It's great out of camera. It'll all match. A lot of our cameras will have that. But on top of that, it's also working with things in the log file format. Exactly. Putting in this same LUTs. That's a way of getting everything to be uniform. So you can have multiple cameras running, and you're not going to be doing several different grading process. Everything is going to be equal coming right out of the gate.
Exactly. So let's say I wanted to make the scene more cold. I'm using a hue shift. This is not how it's going to work. Now it looks like I'm sick, really. But let me bring it back to
my face is looking redder and redder as you do that. My God.
But essentially, if you were to change the color temperature, then let's say warmer, then it's going to feel like we're in the summer and it's not 12 degrees outside, right? But and the other side of that, it's something we could do in terms of how it will look, but we just have a lot more control in that. So essentially, it's just a rule that we tell the video to process for any look, really. You could even not, it doesn't even need to be for S-Log itself, but it could just be for like anything that you're editing. But yeah, let's just simplify everything. If you already have a type of look, if you're doing a production and you need to have it look a certain way, then you could literally just record in that LUT, and it's just faster for bringing all that data out. If you wanted to mess with LUTs, getting it back to Rec 709 is already very difficult. So if you actually check out this QR code, there is a library of LUTs that you could use from our artisans, and also the Rec 709 LUT to bring your S-Log back to looking normal, right? It's gonna bring everything back in there, and it won't look flat, and then you could still recover everything and play everything with everything there. So definitely give that QR code a look if you're going in there, and yeah. So again, benefits for S-Cinetone. It's faster end result. Client can handle the files, less post work, just as we were saying earlier. And to pair the file formats and the colors and everything else, RAW definitely has advantages because you have white balance and everything else. It's a lot more information, but again, your hard drive space is going to be... your hard drive space needs to work in a professional manner, and the same thing with your computer. So going back to this, right, now we're with how quick delivery works in post-production, and I hope this makes a little bit more sense now, right? But how do we make it easier? How do we make this work for us, right? And it mainly comes with keeping it easy, right? And that's where our ZV line comes in handy. And also, if you have an A7 IV or anything else like that, that's going to be, something that will work together. But the simplified operation, especially if you have a second camera operator, your significant other, it's also a lot easier for them to use it because there are simplified buttons like Product Showcase, where instead of prioritizing my face, if I hold something up in front of it, right, it would normally prioritize my face like it's supposed to. But if I hit the Product Showcase button, then I don't need to do this anymore to focus. I'm not using a ZV camera, so I can't just hit a button. But the ZV line camera I just hit that button and would be able to focus on whatever's in front right now. Oh, Jason has it here. Let me get Jason in the frame here. Keep your face in
Jason,
there as well.
well, me face, and should be going right up to the white balance checker here.
Yep.
So with the product showcase, it can go back and forth. So the idea is just it'll go there on the quick versus the minimum distance. So great for unboxing videos.
Thank you, Jason. But yeah. And then again, for simplified operation, the background defocus button is also there. That way you just hit it and then it'll change the aperture in the background. We could do it on our cameras like the A7 IVs and stuff, but that's just aperture priority. But again, when operation needs to be simplified for anyone that's not familiar with the camera controls, then it's good to have just in case. So again, looking at this, I just want to show you which one has the newer menu version. And the main reason why is because I want to utilize a thing called creative look, right? So the older generation, like menu version 2, has creative style, and the newer generation cameras, like the A7S III and above, and including the A6700 and the ZV line cameras that we saw earlier, there's a feature called creative look. So with creative look, it already puts in this style type for your photos or your videos. And I personally like film a lot just because it looks really natural. And we also have soft high key, which could really just accentuate the colors and make it more vibrant. And we also have instant is another one of my favorites. And film, again, this is my camera, this is my image itself, and it just really simplified. I had to do a wedding. Well, I was the best man at my cousin's wedding, and he didn't get a photographer, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna bring my camera, I'm not gonna edit anything though, and I'm just gonna give you the files. So that was some of the stuff that I was able to take photos of while I was there. But yeah, in terms of detail, it just makes life really easy if you dial everything in beforehand, right? So if you're wondering what you can do, there's a lot. There's a lot of different looks available, and then there's a lot of different parameters that we could actually change in here as well. So if we look at the camera here, the A1 Mark II, and I set it for picture profile, or not picture profile, it's something completely different, right? And Jason, were there any questions while I'm setting this up?
There will always be a few questions, and just as you're doing that, I had to start playing with putting mine into film setting because that's one of my favorite creative looks. We did get some more things in there as far as just some general questions. We do have the question, and this comes back from Kiwi from what we mentioned before, but relevant to what we were just said with formats. Setting custom white balance, not the right thing to do to match your footage and colors from multiple cameras. And in this case, if you want to expand a little bit, it's more of a post-production, I guess, question that comes through. So to maximize the educational value for everyone out there, we did get a few questions that came in early in regards to post-production, whether you're using Premiere Pro or Final Cut. Your thoughts on the basics for someone learning how to edit videos.
Yep. So if we use this to set the white balance and doing that for every different camera, not the best idea because it's going to be harder to match. So really it comes down to setting everything to be the same, where you're recording, you're making sure, because color is going to happen, right? White balance is a major factor, but you also want to make sure, hold on one second, everything's going to be the wrong color here, but let's see here. We just want to make sure, because we could set the picture profile to be something completely different. You just want to make sure all the camera settings are the same, right? Especially if you're using picture profiles. And the last thing with white balance is that you have to make sure that whichever camera you did use that gray card for, every camera matches that. So we're here at 5100 Kelvin. That's what everyone needs to dial to. We're at AB 0 and GM. That's your magenta and blue. And then so every other camera would need to go to a white balance and set it. So see temp filter here. So it was 5100K. And if I wanted to be warmer, then I could set it here And that's the color that we would try to match between every other camera. So going back at it, we go to white balance, and then we go to custom temperature / filter for every other camera. And then we match what we had the gray card set for initially. So the first camera would be what we set it for, and then right over here. So we set this. Where's my gray card? Well, let's set it wrong. Well, let's set it at the wrong temperature. That way we could go somewhere different. So this is 3000 Kelvin to get that yellow to be gray, right? But because that's completely off, but I want everything to match, this is what the artist wanted, right? To say keep it cool, then I would need to set my custom temperature up to be 3000. Right? 3000 with a magenta 5. All right, let's do that. So we're going to go to 0 for, let's see, magenta 5. Go up.
Who are we to question what the artist had in mind with those?
Exactly, it's all art. Hold on.
What is art?
What is? Where was I?
And while you're playing with that
M5
as well, as Robbie is noting, like this would be a matter of setting up the multiple cameras all in the same way. And what he's going with right there is very important. We have seen many of people come up with footage and all they did was the color temperature, but they forgot about some of the color science involved there as well.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to pontificate as you're going through on this as well, John just asked about in regards to applying LUTs in S-Log or any other raw footage.
What was that? How do you apply a LUT to S-Log or raw footage? Oh, you would need to load that LUT into... It depends on your editing software. So you would need to look up a video for DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere, but you essentially just drag and drop. It should be able to read that cube file. So if you go to that link to download all those LUTs, then you could load that cube into, or that LUT into that video specifically, and then it'll be able to load it. But yeah. But
yep, and that format works well because sometimes you're in post, you could start playing with different LUTs. But if you want it to be ready right out of the camera, I forgot Robbie's food analogy for that. Some of our cameras now will accept LUTs to bake into your footage.
Right, exactly. And creative look isn't really something sought out for in video. You'll see here that we have quick access to picture profile, but it's not really common for creative look. We normally have picture profile, right? But I will set it up as a custom button in my function menu to something I'm not using. And I will go to color tone and make sure I have the feature. So if I use creative look, hold on 1 second. Function menu for video. Oh, I went to the wrong thing here.
I didn't want to call it out.
Yeah, it happens. Creative look.
You're going at good speeds.
There you go. So I like film, and if you turn on a picture profile, it will negate your creative look. So no worries there, right? And you'll see here that we have a lot of control in terms of our contrast, highlights, shadows, fade, saturation, sharpness, and clarity. And so going back to our presentation here, we're able to see what we have full control of here, right? So we're making our own recipes. There's a really good article in the Alpha Universe Asia where Park Sung-jin is our Sony artisan over there, and he has made some recipes with his A7 IV. So if you ever want to try it out, the film situation that he has here. So you're seeing the color temp is 5600K with a 1.5 G.5. We could set that up right now in our camera. So I go over to film, and then I go to white balance, and we go to our custom temperature here. So we'll do 5600K. He likes it really warm. And then a 1.5. So we just need to navigate to that temperature zone. 1.5 and G.5. Perfect. And that's pretty close. And then he also sets up a few other parameters in here as well, just like the contrast 3 and all that other stuff. And this is exactly what it'll look like when you record. So getting it right the first time, again, if you're not editing an S-Log, it's just a really good way to simplify things, to make sure it just comes out of the camera that way. But this is mainly like social media, or maybe even YouTube videos, some YouTube videos if you don't want to have too much time editing on that, right? If you want to check it out, a few more of the whole article, if you want, hit that QR code. And yeah, so again, has there been any questions, Jason, on which is best for anyone in terms of what they shoot or anything like that?
Oh, we've got plenty. We've got some things there as far as what's going to be ideal for everyone's situation. And I thank everyone for putting that feedback in. We also got some preset questions that were here as well. But let us go back to Austin, who has been very patient here as well. And once again, everyone, I put it in the chat. Feel free to add in questions, whether it be something that was in here or even suggestions on how to maximize your gear, upgrade your gear, fill in the gaps. There's plenty of it. Now, in this case, Austin, your original question of, future models that unfortunately do not exist because we're in the present. Robbie and I get the questions a lot about what people are always looking for. And we just mentioned earlier, like how A12, A7R5 have 8K video. We had people even 3 or 4 years ago going like, do we buy something because we would want to have 8K capabilities? And if everyone remembers what Robbie was talking about here, a lot of the stuff we're pushing out right now is just at 1080. So you can't let yourself be paralyzed over, features that are not even commonplace or what the future will hold. I'm always grateful that Sony is always pushing it, and there's more features that we thought were never possible to begin with. Years of education experience for Robbie and I have been replaced on the ZV series with push a button for defocus, push a button for product showcase. But in this case, to your original question, Austin, there, you're looking to complement out. And let me just scroll back to what you have. You currently have the A7R5, the FX30, and the FX6. And you're looking for another body for photos. And you do a lot of hybrid work as a film student. You're doing portraits, landscapes, and motorsports. And the video is for personal projects and some of the stuff there when you go on deployment. So thank you for your service, and many documents. And, why buy another A7R5? Some of the stuff there I would say is, depending on your shooting, some people will get a second body because they're worried if the primary one goes down, you need to duplicate it immediately. We had a lot of questions about multiple camera setups. So if I ever go out, I'm like, I have my main camera, whichever body it may be, but I've got other ones that can run support on that, matching the color space, but maybe they do something that main camera can't do. You have the FX6 and the FX30, so I think you're pretty good right there on the video side of things. A7R5 is a phenomenal body. I would probably be looking at a second still body that does something the R5 cannot. That could be something like the A7 IV. Could also be upping it to a stack sensor. Could be the A9 III, like Robbie was showing with the global shutter. Could be the new A1 II. If you're thinking of another still body, though, for video, Robbie and I can go on and on about an A7S III and what that could bring you for low light stills and video. But I would probably look at a full frame complement to go with the A7R5. Robbie, your thoughts on what Austin should look into?
I would say if you wanted to wait for a camera that doesn't exist now, then that may mean that you don't have anything that you need currently, right? So if you feel like you're short on anything, and it would resolve it for you if you had an A7S III, like, oh, low light isn't there for me, then I would consider getting an FX3 or an A7S III if you're doing photo video, right? I use the A7S III all the time for weddings, especially during reception, where resolution isn't that big of a deal. It comes down to where you're outputting it. If you're printing 13 by 19, then 12 megapixels is going to be perfectly fine. Your clients won't be able to tell unless it's for someone large like Coca-Cola who need all that data, right? So, but then again, for those rare moments that we get that, unless you're just already knee deep in the field of your career, then a higher resolution camera or something that you need, then buy what you need if you need it. But if there's anything that you're speculating for the future, then that means you could kind of hold off and wait for it. But if you can't wait for something and you need something resolved, then I think there's already a camera that can do that for you. Especially one of my favorites is the A7S III. Because I like having the electronic viewfinder. I like having that flexibility of low light. It's still an amazing camera to this day, for sure. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it should. As you just said here, a lot of it's for social media and internet
Oh,
usage plus
A7S III
personal
FX3,
prints.
man. Or the ZVE1. That's $2,000. I think there's a promotion on it, if I remember correctly. But yeah.
It would do a lot there for the video stuff as well as the low light on both FX3, S3, and the ZV1. And it is something that with the whole ZV series, they are really concentrated and designed for content creators. And there are some things in there that really do help with social media usage. It's just form factor, power delivery, lots of things across the board. We also have Robbie here. We'll give a quick one in and then we'll continue with the slides. From Talent Photography, what is the best setting for fast focusing subjects on horses in video? I'm gonna go with real-time tracking, and you go with the details, buddy.
Yep. So, well, the cameras have a touch feature on the cameras where it could track, but I would probably want to go if you're recording horses. They're probably gonna be you're panning left and right. So I would probably go for something like center, or even being able to move your autofocusing point, right? So we could have the spot, and we could choose the area where we want to focus on. And as long as we treat it like a crosshair, then it'll find that texture and be able to track. So as long as, let's say, it's in the center and I move it around, then it's always going to be tracking whatever is in that crosshair. So you could pan left and right, follow the horse, and whatever's there, it should be able to keep up, right? So that's probably what I would use. If you need a larger frame area, then I would use zone, and also utilize your recognition target, right? I was recently doing sports, and I was on animal bird, and it wasn't able to pick out the humans who were wearing helmets, even though I had the AI autofocusing chip, right? It was focusing on the net in front of it. But once I told the camera, hey, less guesswork, I'm looking for humans, so it's going to look for a human. It found the body. The AI autofocusing chip is able to recognize the torso, the head, the arms and legs. And so if they're wearing a helmet, that's no problem, right? But for horses, I would go for animal. And so it's able to recognize that and then leave the hard work to the camera itself. It's able to pick up Pikachu, great. And make it really see kind of what's going on, right? So just key things to keep in mind. And yeah, I hope
we now know how to identify Pikachu. We now know what Pikachu is.
Yeah, the machine learning is going too deep now. But yeah, I
the
hope
deep
that
learning
answers your
is
question there,
it.
Talent. But yeah, so I'm gonna move forward. As you guys have probably seen throughout the live stream, if you guys are just tuning in now, there was, whenever I switched to a camera, if you find a frame there, I actually had the audio messed up and it was recording two types of audio. I'm currently using our ECM S1R, and I love this mic because it is wireless right now, and I just have it plugged in through the USB-C, and it's treating it as a microphone wirelessly. And I could also just attach it on top of my A7C II. But one of the main things is, like, if audio is bad, let me switch over to the A7 Mark II, and now it should be recording from, yeah, it's recording from the A7C II from their tiny little mics over there from the distance. This probably isn't going to be captivating at all to anyone using a bad mic or just using the mic from there. There's a lot of reverb that could come because I'm so far away, but being this close to the microphone, it will sound a lot clearer. So just some key things to really consider in audio, right? There are different types of mics. Shotgun mic is able to, that's probably what you see more with movies, behind the scene kind of stuff. Lav mics, you'll see kind of connected to a person, or a vlog mic that's connected on top of the camera. And so a vlog mic would work really well, like our B1, ECM-B1, because it would record what's in front and ignore everything behind it. So it's able to ignore the sound and just primarily focus on me, right? But yeah, so shotgun mics, it's very, very directional. And so if we point it downwards from a high area, it won't be able to hear the noise from outside, whether there's a siren going across from the video. I mean, it'll probably pick it up, but not as strongly as the voice that it's hearing pointing down at the subject that's actually speaking, right? So that's why shotgun mics are amazing. It's very narrow, and it could pinpoint the sound for it, right? With lav mics, it's typically omnidirectional, meaning it's able to hear around it in a 360-degree style, but it's also very close to the person. That way, there's no chance of a reverb or echoing because it's so close to that person, and the delay won't be really negligible. And just as background music was such a sore earlier in the live stream, you do want to make sure that it's lower. Unfortunately, I'm using Winamp, and Winamp can't go any lower than 1%. So I just was totally cool with just turning it off. But generally, you don't want to clip your audio. Things like P's, the reason why these microphones have this guard, I don't know if, I don't want to ruin the audio too bad, but they'll have this guard here. Let me see if I can have it shown to you guys. It's so whenever I'm having a P sound, you won't hear the pop, and it won't clip the audio to give a negative hearing like sound. I'm probably ruining the sound right now. Sorry. Let me just pop this back on. There you go. All right. But yeah, you don't want the audio to be too loud. You want to monitor it. And if you're recording in a low bit rate, same thing for video, sometimes you won't be able to recover that audio. So trying to record it in 24-bit audio is really nice if you can. That way you have a higher higher chance of being able to recover that audio quality. All right. So lastly, I just want to talk about some apps. The Creators app is going to be important if you want to record remotely. You could also send the videos to your phone this way, and not just the proxies, also the full-size video itself. So it doesn't matter how big it is. It can actually stop and pause the sending and then send it later, even if you disconnect, which is a really nice feature for the Creators app. This is newer for our more third-generation cameras. The previous generation had this app called it's been so long. What's the app called, Jason? Do you remember? Imaging Edge. Sorry.
Imaging Edge.
I had a crazy brain fart. I've been using that app for a long time too. But the Creators app's just been so useful. You could update your firmware through it. So it's incredibly useful. It's free, and if you do make an account, you do get 25 gigabytes of cloud storage as well. But yeah. So matching all the cameras, right? If you have a 4-camera setup, if you utilize the monitor and control app, you could actually, if you're connected to the same router, you could actually connect to all 4 different cameras connected to that router, right? And you could also check all the settings and change all the settings on the monitor and control app. This was a recent firmware that we did, and this isn't limited to the cameras supported over here. You could actually use it with our more modern cameras like the A7 IV, the A7S III, and the FX3s are also all supported, including the A7C2 as well. But the modern control app, that is pretty incredible because you could have everything match, and you could hit record and it'll all start recording. They may not have a time code, but they will be pretty much locked in at the same time. So it's pretty incredible app that is free to use. But yeah, Jason.
As per the monitor and control app and what we said there with Creator as well as Imaging Edge, if you just want to kind of give a brief explanation on monitors, and to Scott's direct question, can the app essentially make your cell phone a monitor?
As long as it's within the distance of the Wi-Fi signal of the camera, right? Because it's technically, yes. You can also technically have it as a live field camera, as a monitor, if it's connected to the wireless signal. You could have the monitor and control app connected to that data point, like that router. You could have it connected to that router, or you could connect directly to the camera. So as long as the camera is connected to either the router or your phone, that's really the limitation. So if you wanted to use it as a live field monitor, as long as your router has the reach for you to be able to see it from a longer distance, then technically, yes, you can use it as a field monitor. The monitoring control app, if you connect directly to it, or you're connected, wirelessly to the camera specifically, you can use it as a monitor as well. And you can also see false colors. You could see the Luma controls, or the Luma waves. So that way you could see a full spectrum of red, green, and blues. And if you're clipping anywhere as well on that. So it's incredibly useful if you're going to take a look at apps.
And as a side note, I know we live in pretty much an A and B world of either your Android or you're going to be iPhone. But I know Robbie loves using his Xperia phone as a monitor.
Well, yeah, the Xperia Pros,
4K OLED, just
yeah, 120 refresh rate, and it's a fairly old cell phone now. I'm still using it after 3 years. It's recently been replaced with a PDT dash, I think FP1, if I recall that model correctly, PDT dash FP1, and
it is close.
it has a hot shoe or cold shoe on it, and you can connect the full HDMI instead of a micro HDMI on my cell phone here. It just has a small port for a micro HDMI, but really useful in a pinch as well. But yeah, I'm going to move forward because I think I have one more slide, Jason. And the last app really is the Imaging Edge desktop. And you could use this remotely, or as long as you're wired directly to it, you can actually use it as a recorder, a remote control. And it actually has, if you're doing photography, like still, what's that one where, like Coraline, where it's the claymation kind of stuff, it'll actually show a opaque frame of the original frame that you took, so you could move it to the next frame. So you could also use it that way as well. But yeah, that's essentially it. Thank you guys so much for your patience and bearing with us throughout the live stream. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been incredible. And I'm ready for any questions, Jason, if you're available.
Always available. And once again, like Robbie just said, thanks everyone for the questions, the feedback, the ones you put in, the ones who have been with us here the whole time. And I put in the chat, I think you meant stop action photography.
Stop action.
I'm not sure. Yeah, which has me now thinking of the wonderful film, which will add that to styles I liked, Fantastic Mr. Fox, because that was all practical awesome photography done.
Yeah.
So technically cinematography, as per the earlier questions. Somewhere deep down, Robbie and I might be giving it more thought and texting each other throughout the night. But we do have some more questions that came here in depth. We want to make sure that we have an answer for everyone, or at least an idea or a suggestion coming through. We did kind of go over some of these, and in many cases, we usually say like, hey, people suggested for some gears, you gave us your exact situations. But it is something where everyone comes in at different levels in different spots. And to that, we have Justin's question, looking for an affordable and effective way to get started. Any applications in helping creating something with basically phones, tablets, websites, or events that can showcase pictures and videos. I'm not really sure what you have on that part to have it go with other organizations. So how about we bring it to the basic, Justin? Getting started on a budget.
Yeah.
And from there, it's having some material where there'll be room for growth, and you will not be decimated when you look at your account balance.
Right.
There's a few suggestions, and Robbie has run through this gambit where there are times we both have the beer budget champagne taste, and there's times we'll go back and forth on that. But I will default to Robbie's expertise for some good combos to start out with.
I mean, if you're just starting and there was a very small budget and you already have a cell phone or something of the like, then use your cell phone. You're already recording in that format, and that shouldn't be too much of an issue, I think. It comes down to editing at that point. So if you use InShot, there's that's one of my favorite apps to edit on my phone is InShot. And so it can be free unless you decide to pay for the premium where you don't get ads, but there is royalty free music on it. You can cut and everything else. So yeah, it's pretty awesome to use if you guys get a chance to check it out. InShot, let me put it in the chat here. InShot.
Yeah. We'll put the in shot. And also, this one was on me right there, Justin. Sorry, part of your question was cut off, but the benefit of working freelance or within organizations. And while Robbie's typing that out, I'll just give my sense of sometimes it's good to start out with some organizations because that's getting you in position to find some work, to cut your teeth, to gain some experience, to make some connections. And you've got a support structure usually within. And once you've built that up, you can start to approach things on a freelance level. You've got the confidence from doing these jobs. And in some cases, those aforementioned connections you make, they become the freelance clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the budget is really low, then I would consider even getting an older camera like the A7S original or the A7S II. Those are like really low budget, and yes, you're gonna have to bear with a few more inconveniences, but they're inconveniences you could get over with utilizing different features. But it's still 8-bit video recording, and the A7S II can record in 4K, and that would be the biggest bang for your buck if you're looking at the used section. But yeah, it has in-body image stabilization and really good in low light as well. But yeah, that would be something to consider. There's also a really amazing deal going on at Adorama right now. The A7S III, the A7 III right now is $1,600, and there are benefits as well, like trade-in, trade-ups for anything there. But if you check out the Adorama website, you should be able to see some really good deals going on, including a battery. And
where was this graphic before for this question? We could have just loaded this up. Yeah. Oh, you're on the website. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's some of your answers right there. Adorama's put together basically, your turnkey bag to go out there. There's everything in there.
Yeah. But it's a good time to look up and check out some good deals. And if you are local, definitely ask about their trade-in policy to see if there's any promotions that could go on top of that. But thank you, Talent, for your comment there as well. Jason, I'm going to monitor the comments with you if that's okay, unless there's anything I'm missing.
Yeah. I'll say we've got some here, and then we're going to scroll back. So if you want, we can go through Scott's question right here.
Yep.
He is a solo shooter running 2 cameras, set up an A and a B camera. Both are A7R4s, because I forgot to put on my glasses. Can a desktop be used as a multi-cam remote control platform?
Unfortunately, I think you could only connect to one at a time when you're tethering. So you're choosing which one you want to connect to, and then you are controlling that one camera. If you're using the A7R4, you can probably get a remote, the RMT-P1BT. Let me see if I can look that up. That way, P1BT, that's our remote, that's Bluetooth. And the A7R4 is also capable of connecting to that right here. So it's connected via Bluetooth, but this is only for one camera. But if you scroll back a little bit, the monitor and control app, that's really for the newer generation cameras. So that could have resolved it if you had multiple cameras, but it needs to be at least like an A7 IV or the A7R5. Unfortunately, it's not something that's compatible with the A7R4. So we'll have to get creative with that, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah. But there's always ways, and that's why things like that remote, it opens up possibilities. And we had the question earlier, and sometimes people are like, I'm waiting for something to be that feature that I'm looking for. Am I going to miss it on a camera? Sometimes the thing you've been waiting for, it could be a firmware update. It could be something on a newer model or an upgrade. So sometimes just got to do a little bit of research, or you put the questions in the chat. Robbie and I can have a solution there for you. This one's going to be interesting from Mike, who does macro photography, mostly insects, using the A7R3 with a flash. He would like to start doing some slow motion video as well. I'm going to throw this to Robbie again, but I would say one quick thing to look at is one, probably make sure you have some constant lights going there, as the flash will not help out in video. And we didn't talk much on the lenses, but if you have like the 9D macro, you will be okay. But keep in mind if you're using, say, like the 50 macro or something with maybe a lesser motor, when it comes to the video, you might get a lot of focus breathing, which is when the camera keeps jolting in and out. So it's something to consider when doing your video setup. But Robbie, I think S&Q might be a likely candidate here
Of
as well
course.
for some video coverage.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, yeah. So S&Q is going to be a good one, and there should be a section. We did talk about that earlier today, in this live stream. So definitely scroll back after this live stream's done. It'll be uploaded into the internet for everyone to see. So any mistakes that we've done, it'll be locked in here, and I can look back at this in 10 years and go, man. But all in all, what you should definitely consider is on top of S&Q is that you get additional light. And you don't need to get a LED or continuous lighting or anything like that. You can go outside on a cloudy day if you need to be at f2.8 depending on the aperture that you like, or you could be by a window to reduce the amount of light. There's a lot of ways to resolve the lighting issue, and you need a lot of light for something like that. If you're doing macro and 1/500th of a second and listening to the 180-degree rule, so adhering to the 180-degree rule, doing the slow motion setting like S&Q, you would have to consider getting a decent amount of light because you're just not going to have as much light available. So those are things that I would consider if you're doing macro there. But yeah, thank you, Micah.
Yeah, be a good one. And we're gonna go back for composition and visual. You had some questions there. We did not forget about you on that. Robbie, I don't know if you want to put up the slide on this one again, but we're looking at the term of shutter speed and shutter angle. And basically what kind of situations you would be, playing with those in. And also, if you want to touch lightly just a little bit about, slowing down your shutter and the differences between, say, an f2. Most lenses here will not be having the capability to go up all the way to an f64. We could spend another hour or so going over T-stops and some of your other questions here, composition. But just keep in mind, in the ISO versus gain, you're basically looking at light capture. And to your question there with multiple cameras, I'd probably be a little bit more concerned with just matching some of the color science. Everything else right now, a lot of it could be fixed in post if your ISOs were not exact for the light gathering. You'll be close enough, but the main thing I'd look at is making sure your color science is up to date.
Right. So that was a lot in the mind pipe. So we're gonna make smaller
Smaller.
Yeah, so let's figure out which question first to answer.
We'll go
one?
with, we're gonna go right back to just what we wanted on the original here. Just scroll down. Talk more when you would use shutter speed versus shutter angle, since the shutter on cameras today, if the sensor is turning on and off in seconds.
Yeah, so shutter speed and shutter angle, it's really preference and school of thoughts in terms of how you're recording. And convenience as well. If you're primarily a videographer, then shutter angle is going to be really great, because if we're recording in, let's say, 4K 120, then shutter angle at 180 degrees will be set at 1/240th of a second automatically, right? And if we were to go to 30p, the shutter angle would automatically go to 1/60th of a second. So that's where the advantage of shutter angle is in comparison of just setting the shutter speed. And the FX3 has gotten the new firmware update to choose between shutter angle or the shutter speed. So that's mainly where it is. And yeah, so the next question was concerning the shutter angle, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so hit me with it.
Oh, that was you pretty much just shutter
perfect.
speed versus shutter angle. Yep,
Okay.
you got it right up there.
All right, so next?
Some of the other stuff we have in there, like I said, like basically can't go through all the stuff on the ISO and gain for light, but we've
Right.
got some less technical questions here. Where do we find inspiration to recharge our creative and professional batteries from Jay?
Oh, man, I'm just like watching TV itself and just finding a good movie to actually sit down and think, wow, that's pretty incredible. And just getting a chance to take a break, honestly. So video games, even that has really cool angles. We've been looking at like paintings. We could go on and looking at the different ways paintings are composed, right? And we could match that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks, Micah, for joining, and thank you, everyone. I think we went a little bit over.
We're a little
typically
bit
do,
over, and
as
we'll
we
be done
typically
in
do.
And I'll just say on behalf of Robbie and I, sometimes when you see us get slightly distracted at a Sony Adorama event, we just found inspiration and we got sidetracked. So we apologize
Yeah.
when that happens.
So thanks everyone for joining as well. I just want to get this out of the way at least to make sure that I thank you, Jason, thank Adorama for hosting, and it's always a pleasure to be joining. This is our, I think, our 19th Mirrorless Monday, which is insane. So we've been doing this for a while, and hopefully, I'm sure there'll be more. So I really do hope that we'll see you in the very near future, and we'll talk about, if you have any suggestions at all, leave them in the comment. And I will look back at these videos from time to time to see if there's any comments I could answer. And yeah, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Adorama, for joining us and taking the time to learn. I hope this was useful. And yeah, any other questions, Jason?
Nothing else that is there in the chat, but as Robbie said, just want to thank everyone for joining us and Adorama for having us yet again for, oh my god, 19.
Yeah. Yeah. We started this, I think, almost 4 years ago, or maybe three, definitely 3 years ago.
Somewhere there's a way to look it up. We'll judge it by the next one. As time does fly. But thank you, Robbie, for putting together that deck. It was very informative, and you put it together, and hopefully we have demystified some of the mystery that is there in video.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining, and if any questions at all, find us on our social media and shoot us a DM. Be happy to answer them for you. All right.
We will do our best. Everyone, you stay safe, and we'll see you all out there.
See you guys.